Hi, I'm Thann Bennett. Thank you for listening to The Equipped. Faith Radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thank you for giving and for sharing with a friend. Nigeria is now a country of particular concern. The United States government shut down and snap, and a major question on a matter of foreign affairs. Hey everyone, I'm Thann Bennett. Welcome into The Equipped. Those are our leading headline stories of the week. I am so grateful you are along for the conversation. If you are new to this broadcast, we are very simply a gathering of Jesus followers who come together each week around a newsletter and this broadcast to view all things in our world through the lens of the true and the beautiful. And so here's what we do. We consider 3 headline news every week, and we consider our approach to interacting with those stories in a way that brings the redemptive power of the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. But we don't do it without bracketing those stories between the true and the beautiful. And so when we come to the beautiful segment of the broadcast at the end of the story, our time together, we're going to be talking about how there is beauty even when you feel out of place. That'll be at the end of the broadcast, but we are going to start, as we always do, by standing on truth. And this week, we're going to consider a story that should culminate with you exclaiming, "Now I know." That is right now on The True. Now I know. Now I know. They are just 3 little words, but they tell a very significant story. They tell a story about a woman whose son had been dead, but now he was alive. It's a story about a woman who had been grieving, but then a prophet of God intervened and called on God to revive the boy. The prophet's God responded to that plea, and the boy came to life. He once again breathed the breath of life, and in response to that miracle, the woman proclaims this. You can find it in 1 Kings 17:24. She says, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." Now, at first glance, I think this story and this reaction seems completely normal. Put yourself in the shoes of this woman. Your son has been dead, but now he is alive. He's alive at the hands of the prophet, a prophet who cried out to God on your behalf. That God raised your son from the dead. Surely you would be proclaiming the same. Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. You would be acknowledging that higher power as well. But I want us to talk about the use of that very little word at the beginning of that statement, now. The word now in that statement denotes a change in belief. It is not just the existence of belief coming into fruition. It is a change of belief. Now I know. It signals that she believes now, but she previously did not. It communicates that until now, this woman had been holding on to disbelief, and maybe that doesn't seem unusual in a vacuum. There are lots of people who hold on to belief until God moves in a mighty way in their life, but it is a remarkable fact in this story because of what has just transpired in the 17 verses before the one that we just read. I'm going to give you the short version of the story. You may know the whole story already. If not, you can read it for yourself. It is in 1 Kings 17, verses 7 through 23. But here's the short version. This prophet asks a woman who he has just met for some bread and for some water. The woman tells the prophet that she only has enough supplies to make one final meal for herself and for her son, and then they are going to die. The prophet tells her to make a meal for him first anyway, even in the face of those circumstances. And the woman obeys. And miraculously, day after day after day after day, the supplies to make bread are replenished, and they never run out. Don't miss this. This woman and her son have been living in an ongoing miracle, and that miracle has sustained their life on a daily basis. Their very existence has been repeatedly sustained and perpetuated by a life-giving miracle. And yet we know from what we just read that somehow this woman, before her son is raised, still does not believe. When her son becomes ill and dies, she does not believe, even though her son and she have been a living miracle sustained every day by the God of this prophet. It's only when the final thing, the big thing, her son, when that has been stripped away from her and then miraculously restored, that she is able to say, now I know. The previous miracles were not enough, but this one, now I know. And I want to ask you very pointedly today, are you holding out for one specific miracle? Is there one big thing, one big mountain in your life that you are waiting to see moved and that you are depending on that before you will believe? Is there a broken relationship or a wound or maybe a hidden sin or something that you are pointing to as the thing that has to move before you will believe? And if that is so, I want to really press in and invite you this week and right now as we speak to consider this. Might it be true that you are already living a miracle? Look around. Does your life already speak of the one who created you and who sustains you and who breathes life into you each and every day? Does your life already testify to miracle upon miracle upon miracle? And in fact, does it point to an assurance of a power that is capable delivering on that one miracle that you are holding out for? If you stop and do an honest assessment, I think you will find that the honest answer to that is yes. I think you will find that your God has already done a miraculous work in you, and He has repeated that day upon day upon day. Now, I want to be very clear about this. He can do immeasurably more. That's what it says in Ephesians 3:20. He can deliver on that one miracle that you are holding out for. But I cannot give you assurance that His big plan for that miracle matches the one that you are holding out for. It may or it may not. His plans and His ways are higher than yours. But I do know this: He is able. I also know this today, and I want you to stand on it this week. Your belief should not require the receipt of that one big miracle. You already are a miracle, and there is no need for you to proclaim this truth. Now I know. As we turn our attention now to headline news, continue to stand on that truth. Your life is a miracle day by day. Even though there are big miracles that you may be holding out for, proclaim into each day, now I know. Let's stand on that truth as we consider headline news now. Our leading story is about Nigeria. Nigeria is once again considered by the United States a country of particular concern. The acronym for that is CPC, and it is a designation that is made by the President of the United States and the United States State Department under statutory law. This is a designation used for countries who are determined to be experiencing, and the language of the law is this: systemic, ongoing, and egregious religious freedom violations. And this current designation is in response to some of the news that you may have seen, that thousands of Christians are being killed for their faith. This is a violence that originally led to a CPC designation for Nigeria back in 2020 under President Trump's first term. That action was then reversed by President Joe Biden in 2021 when the State Department made the assessment that the conditions for triggering that law were not currently in effect. The designation has now been put back in place, and the intent is twofold here. In one, it is to point the attention of the world to the Christian persecution that is happening in Nigeria, literally the slaughter of thousands. And then second, the designation requires the U.S. government to put together within 90 days a specific plan of action to respond to that persecution. And so let me just pause here and say, I've been involved in a lot of cases of religious persecution around the world. And there are two parts to a response, and a very, very, very significant response from the United States is purely a designation like this one. Many times, just the spotlight of the most powerful country in the world on the situation will make great strides in alleviating the conditions of those who are persecuted. So even just that fact alone is very, very significant. But the second part here, what will the government of the United States do? What will the citizens of the United States do? That is an important part of this as well. And I want us as Jesus followers, members of the equipped community, to zoom out now and think about persecution in a more general frame. We're going to zoom out and then zoom back in. Let's think about how persecution is discussed in the Bible. I would first point you to Matthew 5:5, and it says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." You are also warned in Matthew 10 that you're going to be hated because of your faith in Jesus. You're told in John 16:33 that persecution is going to land on your doorstep. And then in Matthew 5:44, you are instructed to pray for both those who are being persecuted and for those who persecute you. And then we come full circle to the reminder we started with, that it is the persecuted who are deemed blessed. In all reality, my friends, those of us who live in the West, I live in the West, I live in the United States, you may as well. Those of us who live in the West almost certainly use this word persecution far too loosely. Certainly there's discrimination in the United States. Certainly there are instances where your faith in Jesus subjects you to a double standard or to perhaps an infringement on your First Amendment right to the free exercise of your faith. And those are concerning realities. Those are things that should be taken seriously, and they should be addressed under the law before they balloon into something more significant, because that happens. History tells us that happens. But let's be careful about labeling those things with the label persecution. Persecution and the circumstances that are happening in Nigeria are of an entirely different dynamic. We're talking about the systematic mass slaughter of human beings made in the image of God, specifically because of their faith in Jesus. I'm grateful for the CPC designation. As we said, just that designation will help quell the intense violence. We pray that it will help significantly. But of course, sustained protection for those living in the region is going to require much more significant action. So let's be speaking into this 90-day period where a specific plan of action will be developed. What can you personally do for your brothers and sisters in Nigeria? I think if we come back to our scriptural context, we're going to find several things that we can and should do. We should absolutely pray. Matthew 5:10 directs us to that. These are your brothers and sisters in Christ, and they need and deserve your covering. Next, I think, especially during this 90-day period, you should be asking your government. If you're an American, ask the U.S. government. If you're a citizen elsewhere, ask your government, even if they don't have something analogous to the CPC designation. Ask them to stand up and to protect the innocent in Nigeria. Third, let's be clear-eyed about our own level of persecution and or discrimination. Let's be prepared spiritually for that to ramp up. There is a certainty over time that it will. It may or may not in your lifetime. We can pray and work against it, but let's be prepared spiritually for the possibility that that discrimination might turn into persecution. And then finally, let's accept the word's beautiful promise that the persecuted will be blessed. I want to tell you, this is not an acquiescence to the evil of persecution. We should fight against persecution. But it is an acknowledgement of a holy defiance that your eternal reality is beyond the reach of persecution. This is standing on the promise of Matthew 10:28 for both your brothers and sisters in Nigeria and potentially for yourself should you find yourself in that situation. Matthew 10:28 says this, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul." Hi, Faith Radio family. Thann Bennett here with a special invitation for you. So much in our world today is screaming for us to be consumed by fear and division and brokenness. But the promise of the gospel means that our foundation is secure. We should live not from a place of fear, but instead our lives should be marked with power and with love and with sound minds. And so every week I'm sending out the Equipped newsletter. Every issue opens with truth from God's Word. From that vantage point of truth, we look at a handful of current events in our world. We do it not to simply consume information, but we do it looking for opportunities for the gospel of Jesus Christ to inject love and healing and redemption into those who need it. We close every issue with a simple reminder of something that is beautiful in our world. I want to invite you to join our community. You can sign up at theequippednewsletter.com. That'll trigger an email back to you. Just click to confirm. Again, it's theequippednewsletter.com. I'll see you there. The shutdown continues, and so does SNAP, at least in part. Those are the upshots of this week's developments around the ongoing U.S. government shutdown. It is now nearly a week into its second month, and the broader negotiations have not yet produced an agreement to reopen the government, but there is going to be at least some relief for those who typically receive food assistance under the SNAP program. There were a couple of court cases that directed the administration to use the contingency emergency fund that exists in the USDA. The Department of Agriculture announced that it will indeed do that for the month of November. However, the payments from that plan will only cover about half of the typical benefit, and so SNAP payments will be paid out in about half for the month of November. Of course, if the shutdown continues into December, there will be no contingency funds from which to pay those SNAP benefits, and so the problem is obviously not resolved, but it is maybe alleviated for the moment just a bit. There are a number of layers to this story that we as the Equipped community should be considering. I think those include a larger debate about the proper role of government in things like food aid. There's a debate about the shutdown as a whole that is a very merited one. There's a debate about the constitutionality of using funds to keep programs running, even though Congress hasn't approved them. And then, of course, I think there's this most applicable to us debate about the very tangible reality that millions of people are that typically use the SNAP program to feed their family are going to be without or with less this month. I think there's a legitimate place to land in a variety of different places on those other debates, but they all bring us to a common point here where there are going to be millions among us this month with a very tangible need for food. Those other debates can overlap and compete with each other, and there aren't easy answers for a number of them. But there's a very clear role for you and for me to play in this final one. We talked about it last week, but here's the reality. There are going to be hungry people in your midst this week. And I want to give you just a very direct two-word encouragement. Feed them. It is so straightforward that it almost sounds flippant or offensive or condescending, but it really is that simple for us as Jesus followers in this situation. We're reminded repeatedly of it in Scripture, and I give you several verses in the newsletter version of The Equipped that you can research for yourself. You can find it at theequippednewsletter.com. But the simple instruction, it's very applicable. It's applicable, by the way, even if it is your enemy who is hungry. Romans 12:20 says this, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. And so, my friends, this is a difficult story. We make it a habit of pulling difficult stories out of the news to discuss. But this is a difficult story that actually leads to a very easy to understand application for us. It's actually pretty easy to implement as well. And here it is. When you encounter someone hungry this week, feed them. Our previous story had a very straightforward application. This story is admittedly a little bit more complex, but I actually think the application for this one is very straightforward as well. This is about tariffs. Tariffs are once again front and center in the news because the Supreme Court is hearing arguments about the limits of a president's power to set and direct tariffs. Now, there are two diametrically opposed sides in this debate. The critics of tariffs are asking the court to conclude that tariff policy is a, quote, major question on which Congress has not spoken, and because of that, they are beyond the authority of the president. The government, as well as those from the outside who support the tariffs, are arguing that presidents have wide constitutional authority over foreign affairs matters, including tariffs, because of Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. And so here we go again. These are arguments that we've talked about on this broadcast before. But once again, our primary task on the analyzing side of this equation is to lay aside our predisposition about the parties or the players or the people involved and to consider very plainly the questions that are presented. And I would tell you there are strong and credible arguments to be made on both sides of this debate. The court is no doubt going to have to wrestle with them, and I think we should too. I think rather than just waiting for the outcome here and then, judging it because it is either for or against whatever side we are instinctively inclined to support, I think we should dig in onto these questions directly. I think we should interact with them and struggle with them and grapple with them and understand the nuance and the depth of them. From an eternal standpoint, I do think we should recognize that this story has very limited reach on eternity. I am not diminishing the impact of the issue here because the economic decisions out of the United States of America have a huge ripple effect on people all over the world. They really do. But even so, the temporary tariff policy of any government, the United States or any other government, does not change any of the fundamental realities of your eternal assignment. And this is where we get down to the very simple application for this story as well. You are going to interact with the substantive arguments on both sides of this. You're going to grapple with the actual facts involved. But if the court finds that a president has sweeping authority on tariffs, you're going to go and make disciples. And on the other hand, if the court finds that Congress must specifically speak before tariffs are deployed, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go and make disciples. Have you ever felt out of place? I know that I have certainly felt out of place, and that's the title of the beautiful this week. If you are not a subscriber to the Equipped newsletter, I want you to visit theequippednewsletter.com, click on this week's edition, and scroll all the way to the bottom. You will find an image provided by my wife, Brooke. And I've said this before, but sometimes she will include something that maybe you might miss at first glance because it's a little out of place. It almost looks like a mistake or an accident. This week sort of has that, but it's not something that you're going to miss. It's too large to miss. There is a chicken in this week's image that is very much out of place. And when I look at this image, it reminds me that I feel out of place sometimes in life. And sometimes my confidence is lacking because of this feeling that I don't belong. And I wonder if you can relate to this. And if you can, if there are moments where you feel out of place in your life, I want you to remember this. I want you to remember that your God has gone before you. Deuteronomy 31:8. I want you to remember that your God is with you in that unfamiliar and has in fact prepared those circumstances specifically for you. Psalm 23:5. And I want you to remember that your God will come after you to bless the faithful work of your hands. Deuteronomy 28, 8, and 12. And so when you feel out of place this week, notice the beauty around you. It is prepared for you. I'm Thann Bennett. This is The Equipped, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to this conversation from The Equipped. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. And please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so together we can stay informed and be equipped to serve.